If you've ever sat at a table smiling while someone who was supposed to love you destroyed you in front of everyone, then you'll understand exactly what happened to me that night. My name is Lauren Mitchell. I'm 32 years old. And last Christmas, my father raised a glass of wine, looked me directly in the eyes, and called me the biggest disgrace to this family. Not in private, not quietly, not behind closed doors at the dinner table. In front of 20 relatives, while someone recorded it. And what they didn't know was that those words would cost them everything. Let me take you back. Newton, Massachusetts, Christmas night. The Mitchell house always looked perfect from the outside. White colonial architecture, green wreaths on every window, soft golden lights outlining the roof, a driveway long enough to suggest power without saying it out loud. Inside, it smelled like roasted turkey, cinnamon, and polished wood. My mother had set the table with her good china, the one with the thin gold rim she only brought out for holidays. Crystal glasses, folded linen napkins. Everything symmetrical, everything curated, everything performative. I arrived 10 minutes early. I always did, not because I was eager, because being late in that house was a crime. When I stepped inside, the warmth hit my face first. Then the noise, laughter, cutlery, my cousins arguing over something small and meaningless. For a second, just a second, I let myself believe maybe this year would be different. Maybe this year I wouldn't feel like a guest in the house I grew up in. My brother Mark was already there. Of course he was. Standing near my father, talking business, always business. Mark, Harvard graduate, future CEO. Golden child, me, the creative one, the impractical one, the phase that lasted 12 years. I kissed my mother on the cheek. She smiled the kind of smile that never reaches her eyes. You look tired, she said quietly, not hello. Not I missed you, you look tired. Translation, you look unstable, you look uncertain, you look like you don't belong. I smiled anyway. Because I had learned long ago survival in that house meant swallowing. Dinner started beautifully. Too beautifully? My father carved the turkey like he was conducting surgery. Everyone watched him. He loved that, being observed, being admired. He raised his glass. The room softened. Music played lightly in the background, something classical. Something safe. He started with gratitude. He always did. To another successful year, he said, and then he praised Mark. Of course he did. Mark's leadership at Mitchell Construction, Mark's discipline, Mark's loyalty to the family legacy. I watched Mark nod humbly, but there was pride in his posture, pride he had earned, pride he had been trained to carry. Then there was a pause, and my father's eyes shifted. To me, that pause stretched, and in that pause something inside me flickered. Maybe this was the year he acknowledged me. Maybe he had seen the press about my studio. Maybe he had read the Business Journal feature. Maybe his jaw tightened. And my mother turned her head slowly toward me too. And then he said it, clear, sharp, controlled. Lauren has chosen a different path. The room shifted. I felt it. And then she has become the biggest disgrace this family has ever known. Silence. It wasn't loud silence. It was suffocating silence. Forks froze midair. My cousin's phone, already recording Christmas dinner, tilted slightly toward me. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." My chest burned, but I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. Because this wasn't new, only louder. My entire childhood was preparation for that sentence. When I was 8, I used to sit on my bedroom floor drawing flowers from the backyard. Mark was outside playing soccer. Dad would knock once on my door and say, "You should be competing." Competing? That word shaped our house. Everything was a scoreboard, grades, sports, social circles, business deals. Art didn't compete. It existed, and that was its crime. At 10, I asked for an easel for Christmas. Mark got a mountain bike, red, shiny, expensive. Everyone gathered around him while I opened a small beginner paint kit. Dad laughed. "It's a phase," he said, "a phase." 12 years later, that phase paid my rent. But that night at the dinner table, none of that mattered. Because in his world, legacy was bloodline and boardrooms, not vision, not courage, not standing alone. Back to Christmas night. After he said it, no one defended me, not Mark, not my mother, not the aunts who once told me I was talented. Silence is a decision, and they chose it. I stood slowly. My hands weren't shaking. My voice didn't crack. "Then erase me," I said. The words surprised even me. "If I'm such a disgrace, erase me from the will, from the company, from Christmas cards, from everything." A fork dropped somewhere near the end of the table. My father stared at me. He wasn't expecting resistance, he was expecting collapse. He built his authority on collapse, but I didn't collapse. Inside, I was burning, years of dismissal, years of being compared. Years of hearing Mark would never, all of it reached a breaking point in that moment. I pushed my chair back. The scraping sound echoed like a gunshot, and I walked out, not dramatically, not running, calm, controlled. Because revenge doesn't scream, it waits. Outside, the cold hit my skin like clarity. Snow was falling softly. The house glowed behind me, warm, golden, inviting, a lie wrapped in Christmas lights. My phone started buzzing. Mark, Mom. Cousins, I ignored all of them. Halfway down the driveway, I stopped, and I realized something. They thought they had humiliated me, but humiliation only works when you still need approval. And something inside me had just snapped free. I walked down the street, boots crunching in the snow. Every step felt like shedding skin. Memories came in flashes. My father telling me graphic design was cute. My mother saying I should marry stability. Mark offering me a marketing role in the family company with conditions. Conditions that meant surrender. I had refused, and that refusal sealed my status as the outsider. But what they didn't understand was that I had already built something. Quietly, without their validation. Brightline Studio, 2 years old. Small, scrappy, independent, and growing, they had no idea because they never asked. When I reached my apartment in Boston that night, I didn't cry. I opened my laptop, and I looked at my work. Campaigns that raised money for nonprofits. Brand identities for small businesses that were now thriving. Emails from clients thanking me for helping them survive. Nothing, he had called it nothing. I stared at the word in my mind, nothing. Then my inbox refreshed. New messages, people who saw the viral Christmas clip. Yes, someone had posted it. My father's words were now circulating online. And the comments, they weren't siding with him, they were asking about me. Who was she? What did she do? Why was he so threatened? Threatened. That word landed differently, because maybe that's what it was, not disappointment, threat. I leaned back in my chair, and for the first time that night, I smiled. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because I understood something powerful. When someone publicly tries to shrink you and fails, they reveal their fear. 3 days later, I got a call, unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something told me not to. Is this Lauren Mitchell? Yes, my name is David Wynn. I'm the CEO of Nextwave Tech. I recognized the name immediately, fast-growing startup, expanding aggressively. I saw the Christmas video, he said, my stomach tightened. I also saw your portfolio. Pause. I think you're exactly who we need. That was the moment the universe shifted. The same clip that was meant to shame me became my introduction. He offered a contract. 6 months, $250,000 rebrand. I didn't answer right away, not because I doubted myself, because I realized something poetic. The door they slammed had opened somewhere else. Bigger, louder, stronger. And that was just the beginning. Because what my father didn't know, what my family didn't understand, was that I was about to build something so undeniable that one day they wouldn't be able to say my name without swallowing their pride. And when they finally needed me, I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't gloat. I would do something far more powerful. I would make them ask. Deep escalation, silent power, build inner monologue, heavy, medium-paced, hook-driven. The first time I signed a contract worth more than my father's car, I didn't celebrate. I didn't call anyone. I didn't post about it. I sat alone in my apartment, staring at my signature, feeling something I had never felt before. Not validation, not revenge, authority. And that changes a person. David Wynn didn't just offer me a project. He offered me exposure. Nextwave Tech wasn't small. They were aggressive, well-funded, hungry, and hungry companies don't play safe. He told me something during our first real meeting that stuck with me. I don't want corporate polish, he said. I want conviction. Conviction, the same quality my father had mistaken for rebellion. The same fire he tried to extinguish at Christmas dinner. I remember walking out of that cafe near Kendall Square after signing the preliminary agreement. The winter air felt different, lighter, but sharp, like the beginning of something dangerous. And here's the truth: when you've been underestimated your entire life, success doesn't feel joyful at first. It feels suspicious, like you're waiting for someone to take it back. I didn't tell my family, not about the contract, not about the amount, not about the scale. Silence is powerful, and I was learning how to use it. Instead, I poured everything into the work. Sophie, my 23-year-old assistant with messy hair and fearless ideas, became my shadow. She didn't know the full story about my family, just pieces, just enough to understand that this project mattered more than money. We turned my tiny loft office into a war room, whiteboards covered in color palettes, sticky notes layered like scales, old logos dissected, torn apart, rebuilt. Some nights we didn't leave until 3 a.m., other nights we slept on the office couch. There's something electric about building something that could change your trajectory, and every time doubt tried to creep in, I heard my father's voice. You have contributed nothing. Nothing. I used that word like gasoline. 3 months in, Next Wave launched the rebrand. New logo, new site, new voice, bold, human, alive. Business journals picked it up immediately. Unexpected, fearless, visionary. My phone didn't stop ringing for a week. New inquiries, new meetings, new respect. Brightline Studio was no longer a small creative shop. We were strategic, we were disruptive, we were effective, and then it happened. The first call from Mark. I saw his name light up my phone while I was reviewing analytics. I let it ring twice before answering. His voice sounded careful, controlled, like he was navigating landmines. I saw the coverage, he said. I'm happy for you. Pause. Then he added, Dad isn't? Of course he wasn't. According to Mark, the Christmas video had resurfaced when the business journals started tagging me. People were connecting dots. The daughter he called a disgrace was now being credited with transforming a tech company's public identity. Irony travels fast. Lauren, Mark continued, he thinks you're doing this to embarrass him. I laughed, not loudly, just once. If only he knew I wasn't doing this for him at all. That's what made it powerful. Here's what most people misunderstand about revenge. It isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It isn't throwing success in someone's face. Real revenge is becoming so undeniable that they have to confront their own misjudgment without you saying a word. The calls from my mother came next. Soft, concerned, strategic. She asked if we could talk, which in my family meant return to alignment, restore order, minimize disruption. We met at a cafe in Brooklyn, neutral territory. She wore cream. She always wore cream when she wanted to appear gentle. I don't want the family divided, she said. Divided, as if I had been the one who raised a glass and destroyed someone publicly. She spoke about reputation, legacy, unity. She never once said the word sorry. I stirred my coffee slowly and finally said what I had rehearsed in my head for years. It has never been about unity, Mom. It's about control. She didn't respond. Her silence told me I had hit something true. Meanwhile, Brightline kept growing. We moved out of the loft into a larger space in the Boston Arts District. Exposed brick, high ceilings, real conference table. I remember standing alone in the empty office before the furniture arrived, sunlight pouring in through tall industrial windows, and I whispered to myself, you did this. Not them. Not their money, not their connections. Me. There's something intoxicating about self-built power because no one can revoke it. I hired 2 more designers, then a strategist, then an operations manager. Each time I signed a payroll check, I felt the weight of responsibility, but also pride. I wasn't playing artist anymore. I was building infrastructure, and word travels fast in business circles, especially when you disrupt expectations. Then one morning, the call came that shifted everything. It was late. Sophie had fallen asleep on the office couch. I was reviewing campaign drafts when my phone buzzed. Mark, again. This time, his voice wasn't controlled. It was strained. Mitchell Construction had just lost one of their biggest contracts, a multi-million-dollar development. The reason? Outdated branding, stale messaging, failure to modernize. I leaned back in my chair. For a moment, I said nothing, because inside me, 2 emotions collided: vindication and something dangerously close to satisfaction. The very thing my father dismissed was now the missing piece in his empire. Mark continued. The board was divided. Younger executives wanted change, older ones wanted tradition. Dad refused to admit there was a problem, but numbers don't lie, and pride doesn't close deals. Then Mark said something that made my pulse slow. I mentioned your name. Silence. I could picture it, the boardroom, the long polished table, my father at the head. Someone saying, maybe we need Lauren. That sentence alone was power. Dad didn't respond well, Mark admitted. Of course he didn't. Needing me would mean admitting he was wrong. And for a man like my father, that's worse than losing money. But the board kept pushing. Investors were restless, and modern markets don't care about legacy. They care about relevance. They're going to come to you, Mark said quietly. It's only a matter of time. When I hung up, I didn't celebrate, I didn't smirk. I walked to the window, looked out over the city, and asked myself a question I never thought I would have to answer. If they ask, do I say yes? Because here's the thing about silent revenge. You think the goal is to make them suffer. But when the opportunity arrives, you realize the real question is this: are you building power or just settling scores? And I didn't build Brightline to settle scores. I built it to stand on its own. Still, the thought lingered. The same office where my father once told me I was nothing might soon require my signature. That night I barely slept, not from anxiety, from anticipation. 2 weeks later, the formal request came, not from my father. From their legal counsel, Warner and Blake, the law firm that had handled Mitchell construction contracts for decades. They wanted a meeting, neutral ground, professional setting, no holiday dinner theatrics. When I arrived, my father was already seated. Impeccable suit, controlled expression, but I noticed something new. His shoulders looked heavier, his confidence thinner. He began with numbers, market shifts, temporary setbacks, external pressures. He was performing strength. I let him finish. Then I asked one question. What do you need? The room went quiet, because that question removes ego. It forces honesty. He hesitated, and then slowly, we need help. There it was. Not apology, not reconciliation, but admission. I folded my hands on the table. If Brightline takes this on, I said calmly, it will be as a client. Full autonomy, full strategy control, no interference. His jaw tightened. Control was his oxygen, but oxygen was running low. The attorney slid the contract across the table. The number printed at the bottom was higher than my next wave deal, and this time the signature at the bottom wouldn't just be mine. It would be his. He signed, not gracefully, not happily, but he signed. And in that moment, power shifted permanently, not because I defeated him, but because he needed me, and I didn't need him. That imbalance, that silent victory. But what I didn't know yet was that helping them rebuild would cost more emotionally than I expected. Because business is one thing, family, that's a battlefield with no clean lines. And the deeper we got into the Mitchell construction rebrand, the more old wounds resurfaced. Old photos on the walls, old employees who remembered me as the artsy daughter, old whispers in hallways. And one realization that hit me harder than Christmas night ever did: they didn't just underestimate my talent, they underestimated my endurance. And endurance wins wars. Segment 2 ends here. The empire has bent. But it hasn't broken, and the real confrontation hasn't happened yet. The first day I walked into Mitchell Construction as a contracted consultant, no one knew how to look at me. Some employees avoided eye contact. Some stared too long. Some smiled politely, the kind of smile that says we're waiting to see how this plays out. The building hadn't changed. Same marble floors, same framed photographs of skyscrapers. Same awards lining the walls like trophies from a war-long one. But something felt different. The energy was thinner, less invincible. Success hides flaws, struggle exposes them. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't walking in as the daughter. I was walking in as leverage. Dad didn't greet me in the lobby. He had his assistant escort me upstairs. Control tactic, distance tactic. Message: this is business. Good. That's exactly what I wanted. When I entered the boardroom, Mark was already there. 2 board members I recognized, 3 I didn't. My father sat at the head of the table. He didn't stand when I walked in. Neither did I pause. I placed my laptop down calmly, connected it to the screen, and began. No small talk, no family acknowledgement, just strategy. Mitchell Construction isn't failing because of market conditions, I said. It's failing because it's communicating like it's still 1998. A board member shifted. Dad's jaw flexed. I continued. Your website speaks to contractors. Investors want vision. Communities want impact. Younger developers want sustainability narratives. You're selling steel when the market is buying story. Silence. Then one of the younger board members nodded slowly. She asked questions. Engaged. Dad remained quiet. That was new. Normally he would interrupt, correct, reassert dominance. But this time he listened, because he didn't have an alternative. Over the next few weeks, Brightline moved in like surgeons. We audited every brochure, every press release. Every public-facing sentence? Outdated slogans were stripped, cold language was rewritten. We photographed actual workers instead of stock images. We interviewed employees who had never once been asked about their stories. And the biggest shift, we humanized the company, which meant dismantling the myth of invincibility. That part made Dad visibly uncomfortable. Strength is authority, he said during one review meeting. Strength is relevance, I replied. And the room didn't side with him, it sided with data. Here's what no one tells you about silent revenge. When you step into power, people watch to see if you abuse it. I could have humiliated him, corrected him sharply, mirrored his tone from Christmas, but I didn't. Because dominance isn't volume, it's composure, and nothing unsettles a proud man more than calm competence. One afternoon, after a particularly tense meeting, Dad called me into his private office. The same office where months ago he told me I had contributed nothing. I noticed something immediately. The framed awards looked smaller, or maybe I had grown. He closed the door, no assistant, no witnesses. You enjoy this, he said quietly. Enjoy what? Watching me need you. His eyes were searching for something, arrogance, cruelty, smugness. I gave him none. I enjoy solving problems, I said evenly. This is one of them? That answer unsettled him more than any attack could have, because I wasn't operating emotionally. I was operating strategically, and he couldn't predict that version of me. The campaign launched in phases. Phase 1. Digital overhaul. Phase 2. Community spotlight features. Phase 3. Investor re-engagement tour. Within 2 months, metrics shifted. Engagement up, inquiries up, reputation recalibrating. Investors who had been hesitant began scheduling meetings again. Trade journals published headlines about Mitchell Construction's modern evolution. And every article credited Brightline Studio, not Lauren Mitchell, the daughter. Brightline Studio, the firm, the entity, that distinction mattered because I wasn't stepping back into the family, I was stepping above it. The real turning point came during a quarterly board review. Revenue had stabilized. New contracts were pending, and the data presentation made one thing clear: the rebrand was working. A board member looked directly at Dad and said, "We should have done this years ago." Years ago, that sentence echoed. Because years ago, I had offered exactly this perspective, and he dismissed it as a hobby. Dad didn't respond immediately. He stared at the report, then at me. And for the first time in my life, I saw something I had never seen in his eyes before. Not anger, not control, regret. He masked it quickly, but I caught it, and that was enough. But power shifts don't happen cleanly, they create tension. Whispers began circulating internally. Some senior employees felt threatened. Resentment brewed quietly. "Of course she got the contract," one executive muttered within earshot. "She's family." That comment reached me, and I didn't react publicly. Instead, I called a company-wide strategy forum. Open Q&A, transparent data review. Every change justified with numbers. Every decision explained. Not once did I mention being his daughter. I positioned myself as what I was, a consultant hired to solve a crisis. By the end of that session, skepticism shifted into respect, because transparency dismantles favoritism narratives, and competence silences bias. Then came the moment I didn't anticipate: a private dinner, not Christmas. Not public humiliation, just immediate family. Mom invited me. "Your father wants to talk," she said. That phrasing felt loaded. When I arrived, the house felt different, less performative, less curated. Maybe I was seeing it clearly for the first time. Dinner was quieter, no extended relatives, just the four of us. Halfway through the meal, Dad set his fork down and said it. "You saved this company." Simple, direct, no embellishment. The air felt heavy because this wasn't business acknowledgement, it was personal. But he didn't say sorry, he didn't reference Christmas, he didn't acknowledge the word disgrace. Pride doesn't dissolve that easily. And I realized something in that moment. He would never apologize the way I imagined. Because for him, admitting need was the apology, and I had to decide whether that was enough. After dinner, I stood on the porch alone. The same porch I walked off months earlier in the snow. This time it was summer. Warm air, cicadas buzzing, the house glowed behind me again, but it didn't pull me in, it didn't define me, it just existed. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I needed anything from it. Not approval, not inheritance, not validation. That's when I understood the final layer of revenge. It isn't making them feel small. It's realizing they no longer have the power to make you feel small. But the story wasn't over, because success creates new tests. And the next one came from somewhere I didn't expect. Mark, he asked to meet privately, no boardroom. No office, just us. And what he said that night would force me to choose between power and peace. Segment 3 ends here. The empire is stabilizing. The father has bent, but the emotional reckoning is not finished. Say continue when you're ready for segment 4. Continue segment 4, Brother's Confession, the deeper betrayal, emotional fracture, the final power test. Mark chose a rooftop bar in Boston. Neutral territory again. City lights stretching endlessly behind him. He looked different, less polished, less rehearsed. When I sat down, he didn't start with small talk. He didn't congratulate me. He didn't circle the point. He said something I never expected to hear from him. I was the one who showed Dad the Christmas video. For a moment, I didn't react. The music around us blurred. The skyline softened. And all I could hear was that sentence replaying in my head. I was the one, not a cousin, not a random guest, not an accident. Mark, my brother, the golden child. The one who always stood quietly beside him. You filmed it? I asked evenly. He nodded once. I didn't think he'd go that far. There it was, that fragile justification people use when they light matches near gasoline. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just asked the only question that mattered. Why? Mark exhaled slowly. Because you were pulling away, because Dad still talked about you like you were temporary, and I thought if he saw how harsh he sounded, maybe he'd stop. I studied his face carefully. He wasn't lying, but he wasn't innocent either. You humiliated me to fix him, I said quietly. He swallowed. It wasn't supposed to go viral, but it did, and when it did, he didn't take it down. He didn't defend me publicly. He let the narrative run, because deep down, even Mark needed that shift. He needed the power dynamic to break too. Here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes from people who think they're helping, and that's what makes it harder, because you don't know where to place the anger. Mark leaned forward. You were always stronger than me. That sentence caught me off guard. Stronger. He had the degrees, the title, the direct path to inheritance. What strength was he talking about? You left, he said. I stayed. And suddenly I understood something I never allowed myself to see. Mark wasn't the villain. He was the obedient son, conditioned, rewarded for compliance, trapped in expectations he didn't choose. While I was fighting to be seen, he was suffocating to stay accepted. Different prisons, same architect. You think I had it easy? He asked. Dad's approval isn't love, Lauren, it's performance-based. That hit harder than I expected, because it reframed our entire childhood. Mark didn't get affection. He got evaluation. And maybe, just maybe, he resented that I walked away from it. You exposed me to protect yourself, I said. Yes, he admitted, honest, brutal, human. Silence settled between us, the kind that forces clarity. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he said finally. I just don't want us to become strangers. Strangers, we already were, but not because of Christmas, because we never learned how to be siblings without competition hovering over us. That night I walked home instead of taking a car. City noise grounding me. His confession didn't shatter me, but it shifted something. The villain I had constructed in my mind wasn't singular, it was systemic. Our father's obsession with legacy had shaped both of us. Differently, but deeply. And now I had to decide something bigger than revenge. Did I want to win, or did I want to heal, because they're not the same thing? Meanwhile, Mitchell Construction continued stabilizing. Brightline's contract was nearing completion. Numbers were up. Investors reassured. Public image refreshed. The board was thrilled. And then they made an offer I didn't anticipate. A permanent position, Chief Brand and Strategy Officer. Equity included, a seat at the executive table. It was a powerful offer, financially significant. Strategically influential, emotionally complicated. Because accepting it meant reinserting myself permanently into the structure that once rejected me. It meant proximity, daily interaction, shared decision-making. In potentially shared power, I asked for a week to decide. That week felt heavier than any contract negotiation. Sophie noticed immediately. You're quiet, she said. I told her everything about Mark, about the offer, about the emotional weight of it. She listened carefully, then asked a question that cut straight through the noise. Are you considering it because it's right for you or because it feels like the ultimate revenge? That question lingered. Because taking a seat at that table would symbolize victory. The daughter who was a disgrace now shaping the empire. But was that growth or ego? Brightline was thriving independently. We had momentum, freedom, autonomy, no legacy chains. If I joined Mitchell permanently, Brightline would change, I would change, and I had fought too hard to build something that was mine. On the final day before my decision, Dad asked to meet privately again, not in his office. At the old house in the backyard, we sat across from each other at the wooden table where I used to sketch flowers as a child. He didn't waste time. "You're considering the offer," he said. "Yes," he nodded once. I was wrong. The words were simple, but heavy. I thought discipline meant pushing you toward what I understood. I didn't understand you. That was the closest he would ever come to an apology, and strangely, it was enough. Not because it erased the past, but because it acknowledged it. He looked older in that moment, not weaker, just human. "I built this company from nothing," he said quietly, "and I was terrified of watching it dissolve." Fear. Not control, not arrogance. Fear. That realization reframed everything. Still, understanding someone doesn't obligate you to align with them. The next morning, I walked into the boardroom one last time as a consultant. The offer sat on the table, unsigned. Everyone watched. Dad, Mark, the board, waiting. I picked up the pen, and instead of signing, I slid the contract back across the table. "I decline," I said calmly. Shock flickered across several faces. Dad's expression didn't change, but his eyes did. "Mitchell Construction doesn't need me inside it," I continued. "It needs to evolve beyond dependency." I let the weight of that land. "Brightline will remain an independent partner. If you want our expertise, you can hire us, but I won't inherit something I had to fight to be respected in." Silence. Then slowly one board member nodded, then another. Dad leaned back in his chair, and for the first time he smiled. Not proudly, not strategically, genuinely, because this wasn't rebellion, this was autonomy. Walking out of that building that day felt different from Christmas night. That night I walked away wounded. This time I walked away powerful. Not because they needed me, not because I proved them wrong, but because I chose myself. And that's the quietest form of victory, but there was one final conversation left, one final piece of closure. And it wouldn't happen in a boardroom, it would happen where everything began. At Christmas, 1 year later. Segment 4 ends here. The offer has been declined, the apology has been spoken, but the emotional arc isn't complete. 1 year later. Same house, same white colonial walls, same wreaths hanging on the windows. But this time, I wasn't arriving 10 minutes early. I arrived exactly on time. There's a difference. Early is anxious. On time is balanced. When I stepped inside, the air felt familiar, roasted turkey, cinnamon, polished wood, but something subtle had shifted. Or maybe it was me. Confidence changes how rooms feel. People greet you differently when you carry certainty. My mother hugged me first, longer than usual, not performative. "Real, you look happy," she said, not tired, not uncertain, happy. I smiled. "I am." Mark appeared from the kitchen, no tension in his posture this time, no rehearsed composure. "Just my brother, glad you came," he said quietly. "I wanted to," I replied, and I meant it. The table looked almost identical to the year before. Gold-rimmed china, crystal glasses, perfect symmetry, but the energy was lighter. Less evaluative, less sharp. And I realized something important. When you stop needing approval, you stop sensing threat in every glance. Dinner began, small talk, work updates, cousins laughing, nothing dramatic. But under the surface, everyone was aware. Last Christmas had become family legend. The viral clip had faded, but it hadn't been forgotten. And tonight, everyone was waiting, not for disaster, for resolution. Halfway through dinner, Dad stood. Same motion, same glass raised. My heartbeat didn't spike. That alone told me how much I had changed. He cleared his throat, and for a second the room tightened. Then he said, "This year I learned something important." He paused. "I learned that strength doesn't always look like discipline." His eyes met mine. "Sometimes it looks like vision." The room went still. No one breathed too loudly. I was wrong about that. That was it. No dramatics, no grand speech, just a simple admission in front of the same people who heard the opposite a year ago. And I felt something surprising. Not triumph, not satisfaction. Release. Because the moment I had replayed in my mind for months didn't feel explosive. It felt quiet, peaceful. He lifted his glass slightly toward me. To Lauren, for reminding us that evolution is not weakness. This time, when the glasses clinked, they sounded lighter. Warmer, real, and here's the truth I didn't expect to learn. The apology didn't feel like victory. It felt like closure, because I had already won long before he said those words. I won the day I stopped trying to prove myself to him. After dinner, I stepped onto the porch again. Snow falling lightly just like last year, full circle. But different. Last year, I walked away angry. This year, I stepped outside to breathe, not escape. Dad joined me quietly, no tension, no performance. I underestimated you, he said. I know, I replied. He exhaled slowly. I thought if I pushed hard enough, you'd fit into the mold. I didn't realize I was trying to shrink you. That sentence mattered, because shrinking someone is often disguised as guidance. And when he said it out loud, it dissolved something old between us. I didn't need you to understand me, I said calmly. I needed you to let me build. He nodded once. And for the first time in my life, he looked at me like an equal. Not a daughter, not a liability, not a rebellion, an equal. Inside, laughter echoed through the house. Mark opened the door slightly. You two coming back in? Dad glanced at me. You lead, he said, simple but symbolic, and I walked in first. Not dramatically, not victoriously, just naturally. A week later, Brightline signed its biggest client yet. Not because of the family contract, not because of publicity, but because our reputation had solidified. Independent, strategic, unapologetic, Sophie celebrated by ordering champagne for the office. The team cheered. And as I watched them, this company I built from scratch, I realized something powerful. My success had nothing to do with revenge anymore. It had everything to do with alignment. Alignment between who I was and what I built. Mark and I started meeting regularly, not for strategy, for coffee. We talked about childhood, about pressure, about expectations. And slowly we built something we never had growing up, a relationship not measured by comparison, but by honesty. Dad began stepping back gradually from daily operations, not forced, chosen. He asked for my opinion sometimes, not as a consultant, as perspective. And sometimes I gave it, sometimes I didn't. Because boundaries are part of healing. People online still occasionally reference the old video, the Christmas humiliation, but now it feels like a different lifetime, not erased, integrated. That moment didn't destroy me. It defined the pivot, because humiliation only wins if you internalize it. And I didn't. I metabolized it, turned it into strategy, turned it into fuel, turned it into power. Here's what I want you to understand: if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been called nothing, if someone raised a glass and tried to shrink your existence in front of others, you don't respond by shouting. You don't respond by collapsing. You respond by building, quietly, relentlessly, so that one day when they finally look at you again, they see something undeniable. Not because you forced them to, but because you outgrew their perception. The real revenge was never humiliating my father. It was becoming someone who didn't need his validation. The real comeback wasn't taking a seat at his table. It was building my own. And the real power shift happened inside me. The night I walked down that snowy driveway and chose not to beg for approval. Last Christmas, I left that house wounded. This Christmas, I left it whole. And the difference wasn't them, it was me.